And kicking things off, we have a gentleman who is no stranger to the Observer. Let me say a happy Republic Day and special good evening to UNC Senator Mr. Wade Mark. Good evening, sir.
Yeah, good evening, Mikee, and good evening to your audience.
Yes, indeed.
And happy Republic Day to you as well.
Yeah, I mean, when you think about it, I've been asking some folks, what does it mean? What does it symbolize? But I don't know if it's the feeling of what's going on currently with our political landscape. The Prime Minister, of course, urged citizens to celebrate Trinidad and Tobago's achievements. He did acknowledge, of course, in his message, the rise in crime. However, he praised the country's progress on the world stage. And if you were to look at that, how would, from your perspective, what does all of that mean?
Well, Trinidad and Tobago is celebrating today 48 years of Republican status. And as you know, when you reach or have arrived at that stage, it is really the transference of sovereign power from the Queen or the monarch into the hands of the people. So power and decision making are supposed to be located in the hands of the people. That is why this whole concept of government of the people, for the people, and by the people came into existence, so that the people can be the real rulers of their land, and that is manifested through the elective process, and finally through the decision-making process as it relates to the allocation and the distribution of resources, so that we can have a more fair, equitable, and just society. I don't think when we look at our nation over the last 48 years, and particularly over the last 9 years and a few months under this particular regime headed by the Prime Minister, can we manifest any real concrete advancements as it relates to prosperity, safety, equality, and justice for all of the citizens of our nation? So I think that Trinidad and Tobago has a very long way to go in an effort to bring about the kind of justice and fair play that is required if we are to really pride ourselves as a Republican nation.
Yeah, I mean, when you mention these things, I mean, as citizens, we expect, of course, looking at our democracy, looking at the fact of our civil liberties, and all of these things that matter to us as a society, one has to ask then, why is it that the opposition leader has to write to the Prime Minister, which, of course, constitutionally, the general elections is due sometime later next year, but it could happen at any time, as the case may be. And taking all of that in consideration, as you said, why is it so difficult now? It's like pulling teeth to convince the regime that independent election observers is required.
Well, as you know, Mikey, this democracy that we have here, that is supposed to be under the control and direction of the masses, only every 5 years the masses have a chance to entrust temporarily their power into the hands of their representatives. And what we have seen happening under this regime is a complete betrayal of that trust that has been handed to them temporarily. And as such, you have more of the emergence of what is called an autocracy, an authoritarian kind of society in which the center of power lies in one office holder. It reminds us of the king and the emperor of the past, where all the power was vested in that office. You remember, I think it was Charles I or one of them from France who coined this statement that I am the state and the state is me. But you know, when you come to the state, there is a principle called the principle of the separation of powers. Because if you invest and concentrate power, and when I talk about power here, Mikee, I'm talking about executive power through the cabinet headed by the Prime Minister. I'm talking about the legislature, or what we know as the Parliament, which is headed by the Speaker. And I'm talking about the judiciary, which is the defender and guardian of our civil liberties and rights, headed by our Chief Justice. Can you imagine all of those powers being concentrated, either directly or indirectly, in the hands of one individual, in the hands of one office holder? Well, we have that in Trinidad and Tobago today. We have a modern monarch. We have a modern emperor in which these critical organs of state and the decision making and the powers that go with those processes are literally and virtually concentrated in one office holder. And you have so many examples of this particular Prime Minister abusing and misusing the powers of the office of the Prime Minister. Hence the reason all our independent institutions that is supposed to establish the necessary checks and balances to avoid Trinidad and Tobago cascading into a zone of political darkness have been severely undermined and compromised. And that is where, when we talk about, for instance, the experiences that we are going through today, you cannot separate that from the reality of the almost dismantling of our independent institutions by this administration.
Then you would say that at this time, based on your interaction, that most citizens really and truly have no faith in what is being said as far as our democracy, our independence, when so many times we've seen that independent offices have been politically compromised over the last 9 years.
Yeah, and you're correct. The guardrails that's supposed to protect our fundamental freedoms and fundamental rights have been severely undermined and compromised. I can just draw one example. There's something called the Financial Intelligence Unit of Trinidad and Tobago, whose director has had to be taken to the courts of Trinidad and Tobago, not only by the former Commissioner of Police, Gary Griffith, and his wife, but recently by Mr. Brent Thomas, a citizen of this country who was kidnapped in Barbados by the Barbadian police on the instructions, as we understand it, and they never denied it, on the instructions of the government of Trinidad and Tobago, and brought back here as virtually in chains. And the officer who was leading that charge is now our Deputy Commissioner of Police. So when you can engage in unlawful action, and I didn't say so, Mikee, there's a judgment by Justice Rampasad that talks about the blot on our democracy based on the actions taken by this Keith Christopher Rowley administration. So I go back to the Brent Thomas kidnapping episode. Here it is, under the Financial Intelligence Unit, you have a director who was taken to the court. Why was he taken to the court, Mikee? You are only supposed to investigate any suspicious transaction or activity that is red flagged by the banks and by the police. It is on that basis you can investigate money laundering activities by any individual in Trinidad and Tobago. Right. But you must have a red flag being erected.
Of course.
You know what this gentleman has done? The director of the FIU? Without a red flag being erected, without any suspicious activity being detected, this director went into the personal banking data of Brent Thomas, of Gary Griffith and his wife. And the court had to not only condemn it, but the court found the action of the director of the Financial Intelligence Unit to be unlawful, to be illegal, and to be unconstitutional. And in that latest judgment issued earlier this year in favor of Brent Thomas, the courts have called for the amendment and the repealing of certain provisions in the law that gives to this gentleman what he considers to be a discretionary power, but it is in complete violation of your fundamental right to privacy. I draw this to your attention to give you an example of how our citizens' rights are being undermined, are being eroded, are being breached and violated. And I do not believe that the director of the FIU was acting innocently. He had to be acting on the instructions of the government of Trinidad and Tobago. Somebody in the government of Trinidad and Tobago. So, Mikee, we have some serious issues facing our nation. And that is only the tip of the iceberg, So you're talking about political darkness, and you're talking about economic darkness enveloping our nation.
Yeah, as well as, that in itself has been shown time and time again. And when it comes to those independent officers I mentioned that have been compromised, we are at a point now, a few days away from the 2025 budget presentation by the finance minister. There doesn't seem to be much of a buzz among the citizens as far as expectations. It's been 9 years. I don't think any right-thinking person expects that with this budget presentation that things are going to be done to help with infrastructure, education, food prices, healthcare, you name it. All of those issues that we've been talking about for the past 9 years. And of course, the UNC had their pre-budget consultations across Trinidad and Tobago, I believe. And you got the
Yes.
feedback from those citizens who made their input, many of them coming forward and saying, listen, I just can't survive. I cannot keep my head above water. What then is going to happen now? If this is going to be a pixie dust bag of goodies budget, where's the money going to come from that hasn't been there for the last 9 years? And what are some of the issues are expected to be addressed, if any at all, when Minister Imbert makes that presentation on Monday?
Now, Mikey, you are aware that for decision making to be based on what I call correct, for you to, let me recast that, decision making must be evidence driven, must be data driven. You cannot make informed decisions, or you cannot take informed action if it is not evidence based. What has happened over the last 9 to 10 years, you have had, for instance, data in many instances being manipulated. You have had data being managed in order to achieve certain outcomes. So what we have in Trinidad and Tobago is a constant. And what is that constant? The constant is a minister of finance who has been in office and serving in that office for 10 years. This year would be his 10th year. And what we have witnessed is economic, in fact, I would qualify that, massive, monumental, economic mismanagement of our nation's resources, whether it be human, whether it be financial, whether it be natural, whether it be technical. All of our resources have been mismanaged. And all you have to do, Mikey, is to look at the macroeconomic indicators. The macroeconomic indicators, even though they try to manage and to manipulate the numbers and the data, the macroeconomic indicators are telling you that everything is heading south. So we have the latest economic bulletin issued by the central bank, July 2024. And what is staring you in the face, Mikey? Even though the IMF told us that the economy would grow by over 2% in 2023, even though we were told by Imbert that the economy would grow by about 2.7%, what is the reality? The reality is that for the first 4 quarters of 2023, economic growth is 0. The economy has not grown. So if the economy is not growing, Mikey K, it means to say that your policies have failed the people. So that is one macroeconomic indicator that you can use to measure the progress of a nation. Look at the state of real GDP. You also have to look, Mikey K, at the state of unemployment. Even their own unemployment figures, even though it's understated and it's a fictional number, they have now admitted that unemployment has risen from 4.9 to 5.4%. And that is an understatement. Not to mention underemployment, where people are working for less than 30 hours in any week. So you have unemployment, you have underemployment. That is another macroeconomic indicator telling you that the economy of Trinidad and Tobago is in a state of depression. Then you look also at our debt, our national debt, which is made up of the domestic component and the external component. And where are we today, Mikee? Our debt today is close to $142 billion and rising. Where are we going to find monies to honor those payments when we are not generating economic growth? Capital program, or what is called the PSIP, that's supposed to be between 10 and 12 billion dollars, because it is through capital formation that you are going to generate growth, you are going to generate jobs, you are going to generate revenues. You know what is capital program or formation or the PSIP? It's just under 4.2, 4.5 billion dollars. How can you grow an economy with such a small capital program? And most seriously, another serious macroeconomic indicator that you have to pay attention to is the state of our foreign exchange reserves. Mikee, when the fellas came in 2015, they got 10 billion US dollars, covering 11.5 months of imports. Today, as we speak, Mikee, our foreign exchange reserves stands at just about 5.7 billion US dollars. And you know the latest? Scotiabank is telling you, if you have a debit card and you go to Hyatt or you go abroad and you're using that card, all you can access is 50 US dollars. And if you're using your credit card, your maximum is 1,200 US dollars. Now, Mikee, this is the same prime minister who shut down Petrotrin, boy. The man shut down Petrotrin. Petrotrin was an earner of foreign exchange. We used to get from Petrotrin close to between 400 to 500 million US dollars, right, on a yearly basis. In terms of foreign exchange, look at the kind of money we are spending to import fuel from abroad. It runs into the hundreds of millions of US dollars. So Paria has now become a foreign exchange user, when Petrotrin, when it was up and running, was a actual revenue, foreign exchange revenue earner in Trinidad and Tobago. So, Mikee, when we boil down the Baji, our economy is in a state of deep, profound crisis. The economy has crashed. The economy has crashed. The government is broke. They have no money. They're running on fumes. They have maxed out their central bank overdraft. And that is why, Mikee, they have reduced our primary cash reserve requirement from 14% to 10% in the space of 1 month between June and July of 2024. The purpose of that is to allow more liquidity in the system to facilitate greater borrowings. With the reduction of that reserve requirement from 14 to 10%, some $4 billion have been freed up so that the government can borrow. I know why they can borrow. Because their revenues right now as we speak is way below what they were supposed to earn. In fact, I think it was Mikee Ajun, a young economist from UE, recently said that when you look at our revenue stream in 2024 for the first 9 months compared to 2023, first 9 months, in the first 9 months of 2023, from the energy sector, energy revenues, oil, natural gas, petrochemicals, Mikee, we earned $21 billion in that period. You know what it was in the first 9 months of 2024? $10.2 billion. We lost $10.8 billion. We are forecasting a massive budget deficit of $15 billion and not the $4.3 billion that we are being told in this economic bulletin. That is what we are forecasting. That is the research and data that we are examining.
And the thing about it, Senator, I mean, I'm certain that you are not here to preach doom and gloom, but this basically is these are the fundamentals. I mean, this is the reality that we're facing. This is real.
And listen, we are not speaking gloom and doom. We are dealing with the hard facts. And facts are stubborn things. You have to deal with the reality. Mikee, the cost of living has gone through the roof for ordinary people. Mikee, if in 2015, 2016, you could have spent $100 to buy, for instance, let's say, 5 pounds or 10 pounds a rice, or let's say for our argument, you could spend $100 to get 100 dinaments. At the end of 2023, you can spend that $100, but you can only get 75 dinaments because the purchasing power of your dollar has collapsed. And that has come about because of the explosive rise in the cost of living. And most importantly, we continue to import inflation. Our food import bill has moved from 6 billion to 8 billion and rising. And Mikee, we don't know where we are going to end up. You know that foreign exchange is the lifeblood of our country. Without foreign exchange, our economy will definitely crash. It will not be able to function. There will be no economic activity. Remember, in 2010, 2011, we were producing 4.1 billion standard cubic feet of natural gas. By 2014, we went to 3.9 billion standard cubic feet of gas. Today, as we speak, Mikee, we are down to some 2.5 billion standard cubic feet. We have lost in the last few years almost 1.5 billion cubic feet of gas.
All right, so Senator, let me ask you. So what are we expecting to hear from the finance minister on Monday? Because we have hitched our wagon onto the Dragon gas deal, and that seems as though it's not going to materialize anytime soon. If it ever does, I've spoken to former Minister Kevin Ramnarayan right here on the Observer, and he's lost in the sense that how is that ever going to become a reality? Nobody knows. So we're looking at what's going on in the energy sector. We're looking at direct investment. We're looking at our foreign exchange market, all of these things. Then what are we going to be told on Monday that can bring any sort of chance for us to be elevated as citizens in this country?
I want to tell you something that Mikee, Winston Churchill said. You cannot tax your nation into prosperity.
I agree.
This government is going to deny, they're going to cry, they're going to lie, and they're going to mamagai the people once again in the 2025 budget. You know who they are going after? They are going after the small doubles vendor. They are going after the coconut vendor. They are going after them fellas who does deal with bacon shark. They are going after the hairdresser. That is where they are going to eke out money. You know why? Because they have failed the nation. They have not been able to devise or generate one new line or one new stream of revenue. Instead of us attracting foreign direct investment, we are actually losing foreign direct investment. You know, because of the failure of this government to institute transfer pricing legislation, we lost, according to ECLAC, in a report in 2021, we lost 2.6 billion US dollars, Mikee, in terms of natural gas prices. We were supposed to get 7 times the price that them fellas actually told us that we charge them for natural gas in Trinidad and Tobago. They sold the gas 7 times more the price on the global market, and we were only able to get a small percentage of taxes from natural gas through LNG. So the ECLAC was able to show where in 2018, under this government, we lost close to $17 billion in revenues. So you have these multinational corporations literally robbing Trinidad and Tobago, and the government is their allies, because the government has done nothing to bring about what you call transfer pricing legislation in an effort to ensure that we, the taxpayers, we, the citizens, get a fair return on our investment in that sector called the natural gas sector. So they are coming to bleed us. Property tax, new electricity rates, new water rates. They're coming now with, the demerit point system. If you park on the wrong side, if you go through a pothole and your screen, your screen split, they're coming to charge you $5,000, and then they're taking the demerit points from you. But you know what? They are doing that to raise revenues in Trinidad and Tobago, because the government has failed over the last 10 years. And Mikee, never forget, these fellas collected and spent over $550 billion in the last 9 years. Over $500 billion. And look at the state of our country. Look at the state of our economy. Look at crime. Given the trajectory and the trend line, we are going to end up with close to 600 murders in our country. I took a drive with my son today around the Queen's Park Savannah. Today's a public holiday. You will see normally on a public holiday, when the society was more safe and less violent, given what this government has failed to do, you will see children and their parents picnicking, having a picnic in the Queen's Park Savannah, playing, flying kite. Hey, Mikee, you could have seen from a distance. The place was empty. The place was totally naked. Nobody except the grass. Because people are afraid to go out and to have some fun with your family and
Yeah.
your children. That is the state of affairs in Trinidad and Tobago. So don't expect anything from Imbut except deny. He will deny everything. He will cry, he will lie, and he will mama guy. And what he will do, like Columbus, Christopher Columbus, he will try to give out some trinkets in order to mama guide the people so that he can try to squeeze through or squeeze in some way through the back door to get a second term. That ungold face he will never see. And I want to say in closing, we will continue to demand locally, regionally, and internationally, international observers to monitor the next general elections to avoid the PNM government from stealing or thieving the general elections that the people are crying out for to get rid of this albatross that is weighing heavily around their necks.
Thank you so much, Senator. It's always been a pleasure. Always a pleasure to have you on. Best of luck to you and the entire team, and enjoy the rest of the holiday. Have a good one.
Thank you very much, Brother Mikey.
Thank you.